Then, once a critical expanse and mass are reached, the climate tilts inexorably, and the total global freezing can no longer be stopped. This is the development of a global freezing of a planet, as this was also true for the Earth. Nevertheless, such a total freezing of a planet can more or less or even totally be dissolved by the planet's internal functions, which also happened on the Earth, on which even today, there are still a large number of glaciers, which can be found throughout the whole world in smaller or larger forms in the mountains, but in addition, the areas of the Arctic and Antarctic may not be forgotten, which also remained after the small and great ice ages. Now, so that the Earth could free itself again from its enormous mantle of ice, the elementary, bubbling, inner life of the planet itself was decisive, namely the tremendous natural power of volcanism, through which the tremendous heat was generated, which eventually brought the ice crust of the Earth back to melting. Volcanoes have a direct connection to the Earth's interior and, with this, to the bubbling magma chambers, whereby the active volcanoes are also more active in their function, of course, during a global ice age. Thus, the volcanoes remain active and, through enormous eruptions, spew out huge masses of liquid lava as well as heat onto the planet's surface, but only the immediate ice-covered areas all around the volcanoes benefit from this as the vast sheets of ice melt. But in addition to the lava and the heat, the volcanoes also eject huge amounts of the finest dust particles, that is ash particles and so on and so forth, along with enormous masses of carbon dioxide, and these very factors are the ones that ensure that the heat of the sunlight is trapped in the atmosphere. But primarily, it is carbon dioxide that is decisive for this heat effect, for throughout the entire global ice age, which lasted on Earth for 12.47 million years, this gathered together an unimaginable mass in the atmosphere, heating it to about 57 degrees, which entailed that a tremendous global greenhouse effect arose, through which the enormous masses of ice slowly began to melt, by what means the global freezing dissolved up to the small areas at the North Pole and the South Pole as well as in isolated mountain areas, etc. This was also the case on the ground, which took place about 600 million years ago. Of course, immense layers of clouds originated from the slow evaporation of the masses of ice, which surrounded the entire Earth as a closed cloud cover and which, in turn, led to a renewed and even much more extreme climate change. Then, after many millions of years, it began to rain for the first time on Earth, and indeed, in such immense masses that everything was set under water. This tremendous time of rain, during which the waters fell like a flood from the clouds to the ground, lasted for 142 years without interruption, and of course, new evaporations of the falling down water masses took place again and again, by what means the cloud formations were continuously fed, while the powerful volcanoes naturally remained active and constantly ejected new carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The flood-like, falling down water masses combined in the atmosphere with this carbon dioxide, forming acid rain, from which then, over the course of time, natural lime developed on the Earth. This was the development of the Earth in relation to the total global freezing, which then also firstly formed the actual origin for the original emergence of the first micro-life forms of a single salt kind, from which, over the course of millions of years and centuries, life forms of the water, land, and air evolved up to the higher kinds, after which then the Earth person emerged from the whole thing and evolved over many depths and heights to the current state. Until the global ice age around 600 million years ago, only thermal life forms, that is thermal bacteria, existed on the Earth in the scorching heat of the magma and lava, and these life forms were partially expelled from the hot springs of above-ground geysers as well as from small or larger black funnels or chimneys rising high up at the bottom of the sea, and to be sure, along with the other primitive forms, from which, over the course of time, new unicellular life forms could evolve, which settled in the sands of the shores of the seas and other bodies of water and evolved under or in the sand to multicellular life forms. But at the same time, comets as well as meteors and asteroids as well as interstellar clouds of microbes played a very important role once these came into the immediate vicinity of the Earth and fell down upon this, thereby bringing their microbes, etc. to the planet, which combined in part with the Earth's already developed life forms of a similar kind and thereby created new life, or else life forms that were independently brought from space emerged from these. But in relation to the insemination of the Earth with respect to fauna and flora, it must be clearly said that what primarily relates to this didn't proceed from the planet itself but resulted through the inclusions from outer space, and to be sure, through comets, meteors, asteroids, dust particles, and even through the clouds of chemical elements drifting through free space as well as clouds of microbes, through which all the bacteria, fungi, lichen, mosses, viruses, and protozoa of various genera and species were brought to the Earth. The Earth human being first emerged much later out of new amino acid connections, etc., which resulted from the decay substances of plants and animals. The earliest human forms in this regard, which emerged from the planet itself, are to be backdated to 8 to 12 million years, but the actual hominid forms first appeared between 6 and 8 million years ago, from whose lines various human forms then developed over the course of time, but these were not of permanence and, thus, passed again. Then, from the same original line, still other and similar human life forms formed, so with the related human life forms, namely the simian beings, which still exist on the Earth today in various species. The human beings who walked the Earth of earlier times, such as over 20 or 120 or even more than 230 million years ago, were in no way the so-called Earth-made or Earth-created ones, but rather extraterrestrials who came from the depths of space and who stayed here for a certain time or only visited the planet for a short time for expeditions or for major excursions. At that time, the areas of origin and home worlds of these travelers from afar were to be found in your galaxy, so the Milky Way, but also in foreign galaxies. Billy says so once more from your words, it again follows clearly and plainly that humans aren't descended from the ape line but rather apes from the human line. Quetzal says that is correct because the Darwinian theory of evolution, that the evolutionary line of Earth human beings traces back to apes, is fundamentally wrong, for in truth, the evolutionary line of apes traces back to human beings. Darwin was a deceiver in relation to the man-ape evolutionary line theory because he secretly worked on ape bones and ape skeletons with a file, in order to adapt them into his claim and false theory and to present it to those scientists at that time who occupied themselves with the evolution of animals and humans. At first, they were completely impressed by Darwin's evidence and spread Darwin's false claims and deceitful machinations across the globe as correct and as a true sensation. And once they discovered Charles R. Darwin's fraud, it was already too late to correct everything again. Consequently, everything took its course, and the fraudulently created evidence entered into the scientific annals as authenticity. Thus, it also spread among the people, and the erroneous teaching was born that the human being is descended from the ape, which is the exact opposite of what corresponds to the truth and correctness, that the ape is descended from the line of the human being. Billy says the story is well known to me. Through his wrong machinations, Darwin probably created the greatest deception and the greatest lie that a scientist on Earth has ever created. Greater deception and greater lies were probably only created by the Americans, with their made-up first moon landing, as well as those through which religions and sects were created. Quetzal says that is correct. But now, my friend, it is again enough for today, because you just don't look so good in the world, that one could say that you are doing really well. So I want to say goodbye again and hope that in my next visit, I find you in a state of better health. So farewell then and until we meet again. I will come again at the end of the month. Billy says then until we meet again, dear friend. So until the end of May. Please pay everyone my dearest greetings. The end.